Thank you for telling me. Well, it's a great pleasure to be here, and I've certainly found it a really interesting day and interesting trying to prepare for this presentation. There is a large literature on law and finance, and the general view is that strengthening creditor rights is good for growth. More access to credit, lower costs of credit. Of course, there are winners and losers, and it's important to track the losers as well as the winners. What I want to briefly discuss is two sets of studies, one on how well the bankruptcy procedures work in the United States with respect to US distressed airlines. And secondly, a PhD thesis, yes, I mean a PhD thesis, on the Cape Town Convention. And this thesis, I think, is a very rigorous piece of work, which I hope will interest you. So first, the law and finance literature, I would say one of the more important papers on the bankruptcy of US airlines and how they fare is by Polvino. In fact, he's written two papers in the Journal of Finance, and I'm going to summarize very briefly what he finds. First, large fire sale discounts. On average, about 15, 17%, but rising to 35% in recessions. These discounts are larger in Chapter 7 than Chapter 11. By fire sale discount, I mean the difference between the prices at which distressed aircraft sell for in bankruptcy compared with the prices of non-distressed aircraft, of course, controlling for the type of aircraft, the model, et cetera, et cetera. And finally, he finds in more limited evidence, or rather a more limited sample, evidence of misallocation. That is, the productivity of the seller of the aircraft is higher than the productivity of the buyer. And this he calls a misallocation. And he explains it by the fact that during recessions, insiders, other airlines, are constrained for bidding for the aircraft. And as a consequence, outsiders, financial intermediaries, or other industry outsiders are less specialized, less productive, and they buy these aircraft. So you go from high to low productivity. What is surprising, and what has surprised Oren and me, is that so much money is left on the table. That is, as Ignacio said this morning, you don't have to enforce the letter of the law. You don't have to enforce all your creditor rights. You can show forbearance, you can allow haircuts, etc. Why is so much money left on the table? And in a study that Oren and I have done with some colleagues, what we find is slightly different results. The first is this large difference between the prices of aircraft, which are distressed, versus non-distressed. There is a missing variable, and that variable is quality. That is, distressed aircraft are lower quality than non-distressed aircraft. I don't mean they're unsafe, but I mean they use second-hand parts. They use parts from one aircraft to another aircraft. If you like, they postpone refurbishment. And we can measure that quality discount using flying hours, using earlier retirement data, etc. And when we talk to brokers in the United States, they say very readily, we apply a quality discount to distressed aircraft. So what I'm explaining to you is quite practical. And when we put into our regressions this proxy for quality, we find that the fire sale discount is roughly half what Polvino measures, roughly between 8 and 10%. Moreover, the difference between discounts in 7-Eleven disappears. That is, the reason why the discounts are higher in Chapter 7 and 11 is because the airlines that sell aircraft in Chapter 7, they are distressed for longer periods, they under-maintain for longer periods, the quality discount is bigger. And when you adjust for that, the adjusted fire sale discount is almost identical in 7 as it is in 11. Secondly, using 40 years of data at the granular aircraft level, we find that the productivity of aircraft, of the seller and buyer, is rather different from what Polvino finds. We find that the buyer has higher productivity than the seller. If you like, bankruptcy doesn't have a misallocation effect, but on the contrary, has a cleansing effect. That is, the buyer is more efficient than the seller. We also find a result that we cannot really explain. Virtually all our Chapter 7 sales are before 1992. There's a few after 1992. The rest are all sold in Chapter 11. Why we're not sure, I'll give you one conjecture. We have evidence that Section 1110 was not very effective up to the amendments in 1994 and 2000. It may be that the more effectiveness of Section 1110 may explain why there's so few Chapter 7s, but the truth is we don't know. We would love more data. Transaction data would be very helpful, and all we can promise is that your reward will be in heaven. Now, in this last few minutes, I want to discuss this thesis by Beaubien. It's received a very good review in the Journal of Finance and expect it to be published there. She looks at granular aircraft level data for 77 countries that have signed up to the Cape Town Convention. It is a before and after study. It focuses on the productivity of aircraft for aircraft and airlines in countries that signed up for the Cape Town Convention. And the beauty of her experiment is that not all countries signed up at the same time. It was staggered. If it was at the same time, you could attribute changes in productivity to macroeconomic effects. It's the staggering of this that makes this experiment so robust. And the result is that the consequence of the Cape Town Convention is that productivity measured by monthly flying hours per aircraft increases by 12%. More efficient airlines buy more modern aircraft, they have younger fleets, and this is at the expense of less efficient airlines. A quarter of them contract, and the least efficient exit. What is the channel for this greater productivity? It is faster redeployment of aircraft from less productive to more productive users. A reduction from 10 to 4 months. An increase in foreign lending by 10%, and more financial innovation, in part by foreign lenders. Who are the biggest gainers? They are the countries with weaker creditor rights, as you might expect. Countries where the state controls the banking system. That does not mean that countries like the UK do not benefit at all. She shows evidence that repossession is reduced as a result of the convention. There is more competition, the emergence of low-cost airlines. And finally, there are benefits like greater safety and increase in consumer satisfaction. So if you want a rigorous academic study that seems to validate the enthusiasm I hear today from the Cape Town Convention, this is the study. And she also has a second study, I don't have time, which looks at how the pattern of fleets has changed as a result of the convention. And I asked myself a few days ago when I was preparing this, what next for Jeffrey? What next for the next 13 years? And my suggestion, like this morning, is shipping is the ideal next industry. High levels of debt, international, ships cross jurisdictions. Actually, there are many ships that don't cross jurisdictions. They're on the high seas and they're not in any jurisdiction. So the need for consistency and credit protection, I think, is clear. Thank you very much.